All right. Please help me to introduce our speaker, David S. from the Common Solutions Group.
Hello, everybody. My name is David, and I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Firstly and most emphatically, thank you very much for having me here tonight. And Mike, I want to thank you for asking me to speak. I really enjoy giving back. That's, I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and fortunately enough, I found a great sponsor, that brought me through the 12 steps and what have you, and that's what saved my life. Because I continued to relapse, and I didn't understand why I heard a lot of things, and I took the easier, softer way. I heard people talk about, keep on coming to meetings and don't drink and go to meetings, 90 and 90 and blah, blah, blah. And I realized, not at that time, but after I started getting involved in step work, that, prior to that, I wasn't working the program, I was working the fellowship, and that's what I'm going to emphasize upon tonight, too, is, working the fellowship and then working the program, and specifically when you're working the, just the fellowship, we have untreated alcoholism, and it's very, very difficult, you stop drinking, but you don't change. And that's rough. It's very painful. I did that for 276 days. And I couldn't understand why I wasn't changing. I still wanted alcohol real bad, and my thinking wasn't changing. And I said that this AA thing's not working. And then I realized that there's a big flip side to that coin. I was working the fellowship, not the program. And it was rough. I was getting more miserable and everything else. But at any rate, my sobriety date is September 18th, 1999. I just celebrated 15 years just a few months back. And, it feels good about that. But I tell you what, when, the truth of the matter is when my anniversary comes, maybe I don't give myself enough credit. I really don't. It's nice, and it's nice to get a coin and everything. But, you guys, you know what? I want to feel good about myself. Because the better I feel about myself, the better I can be to the newcomer. I want to inwardly prepare myself to be of maximum service to the new person. That's what I want, and I want to continue to give and, think less of myself. Not, I don't want to say think of myself poorly. I don't go to meetings and say I'm a selfish, self-centered, awful person, this and that, because what you believe of yourself is what, I have a lot of, I had a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of dishonesty and fear, and I don't want to continue, to believe that that's the kind of person that I am. I don't deny those things. At the same time, I like to talk about a solution, I truly do. And so anyway, September 18th, 1999, I went to a meeting, and I was about 7 hours sober. And my life at that time, I'm not going to go into it. I went through a lot. No comparisons. I went through a lot. I wasn't able to hold a job. Just say that. I got arrested multiple times. I went into the hospital for multiple reasons, and from drinking too much and what have you. And I went to this meeting, and I didn't want to live anymore. I wasn't thinking about if I was going to hurt myself. I was thinking how I was going to hurt myself. And there was a guy at this meeting, and I knew he had been through the ringer too. He had come from a very dark place, much like myself. I had, my dark place was, not only was I not able to hold a job, but I had to take things that didn't belong to me. I had to live in places that were very not pleasant at all. The people I was hanging around with were, some of them, extremely dangerous. It was not a pleasant sight. And I owed a tremendous amount of money. And so I went to this meeting, and there was this guy there, and he always had this enthusiasm and this optimism about him. And you can sometimes tell, people when they share, you not so much hearing what they say, you feel what they say. And this guy just had a punch to him. And there was a break at this meeting, and I walked up to him, and an absolute mess. And I said to him, I need some help. And he said, okay. He was looking for a sponsor. I said, yeah. And I said, he goes, okay. He goes, well, he said, I just want to let you know. He said, my job as a sponsor is to bring you through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, as they're laid out in the book. He goes, we're not here to be buddies. We're not here to be pals. He goes, if that happens, so be it. And very good if it does. But we're not focusing on a relationship with each other. We're focusing on, me helping you. It's not about us going out to lunch and, talking over our personal problems. We don't do that. And I'm saying to him, of course, you know how, in early sobriety, I said, this guy is a jerk. What an idiot. And, he was literally so methodical, but he was spiritually methodical. And I'm going to specify on that. We exchanged phone numbers. And he said, call me today at 5 o'clock. And I said, sure. So I knew that this was, my health and everything else was awful, and I knew this was the last house on the block. And I could not believe I was alive. Couldn't believe it. So I was staying at my mother's house. I had no car. I had no money. I had very little clothing. I had nothing. And I can't even believe she allowed me to stay there. And she did. And so I sat near the phone at 4:30. I'll never forget it. And at 4:45, the phone rang. And I'm thinking, how our minds are. And I'm thinking, it's him. He's going to say, I heard things about you. I don't like you. All the codependency stuff comes in. You're out there. I didn't realize you were this bad and what have you. I picked up the phone, and it was him. I said, oh, no. And I said, hey, what's up? And he said, David, how you doing? I said, I'm all right. And I felt good that he called me. And he said, listen, I wanted to take the time to call you and let you know how honored I am to be sponsoring you. And I'm really, really glad that you asked me. Because, you can change your life if you so choose. All you got to do is what I tell you to do. He said, we're not going to do my program. We're not going to do your program. We're going to follow the original program that's in the first 164 pages of this book. And you guys, and he goes on and on about how excited he was. He hasn't had anybody ask him in a month to sponsor and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, and I had been to enough meetings to know, of which I thought to know, that the sponsee calls the sponsor. So after he gets done with all this stuff, I'm so selfish and self-centered at this time, I couldn't understand why he's calling me. And I said to him, can I ask you a question? He said, of course. I said, why did you call me? And you know what he said to me? He goes, because you're the one who's sick. You guys, I didn't know how to respond to that. Talk about an unselfish, loving comment. Because you're the one who's sick. So from this day on, I call my sponsees. And you know what happens, you guys? That's the first C of the 5 C's of the Oxford group. Okay? And it's called confidence. And if you are ultimate, and Bill uses the word confidence in our, in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, until we win the newcomer's confidence, very little can happen. Don't forget that's very valuable information. Win the newcomer's confidence, and then you can really start working with him. And speaking of the Oxford group, I'm going to get off track here for a second, and I love to talk about James. James Houck was my mentor. He wasn't my sponsor. I guess you'd call him my sponsor. We did everything together. I talked to him every single day on the phone. I saved every letter he sent me, every picture. And actually at my old condominium in Old Saybrook, I made in my dining room, because I put it in my dining room because I'm a chef. And I have people over for dinner, and they would read these letters, and they would look at pictures, and and everything else. And James was, he got sober December 12th, 1934, and he stayed sober until 2006 when he died. And he was 72 years sober. He was the last living member of the Oxford group, and the man really taught me how to live. And so anyway, I made this really cool, it was very simple. There's really nothing huge about it, except it made me feel good I could do something for somebody else. And I had all this stuff, and a lot of it was placed very strategically where this meant this, and I got a video cam, and I went around, and I actually talked while I was recording, and I made this tape, and I was able to send it to him about 4 months before he died, so he got to see it. And he would love to be here tonight with you guys so much. Oh, would he love that? And he would love to shake all of your hands, and he would probably give the ladies a hug, and he would love to talk to you, and you could see how inwardly he prepared himself with the God of his understanding. And he was he helped people. He did some at the ages of 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99. He was going around the United States of America, and he was always scratching his head what he could do for other people. And I asked him one day, when I first met him, he was like 68 years sober, 67 years. I said, how come no one's heard of you? I said, is this guy like in an insane asylum or something? He's making stories up. He said, David, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy helping other people. Talk about humble. And if I had 72 years, I think I'd have a hard time shutting my mouth about it. So, and he said, 70 years of sobriety and a $1 bill gets you a cup of coffee. That's all, that's what it gets you. So anyway, my prayers are with him. The cool part though, I have no regrets at all with him. I spent as much time as I could have with him. He taught me how to do step 11, which I never would have known how to do, because it's very subtle in the book and so forth and so on. But I always like to mention his name. And so this, the sponsor guy, back to him, Pete, love Pete. And Pete, he said, let's meet at the meeting tomorrow. He said, it starts at 6 and we'll meet at 5. He goes, we're going to take step 1. And I'm, of course, questioning everything because I know much more than he does. I'm a day and a half sober and he's 12 years sober, and I'm thinking, he's not right about this. And you know what, you guys? This man dismissed every fallacy that I've ever had. And I thought he was taking me through the steps too quickly and what have you. And he had me do an exercise, and I started from the doctor's opinion, which I love. And he had me read 2 pages a day. But this was after 25 and a half years of drinking and other things. And when I just read, my mind wouldn't do well. So he put a good kicker in. After each paragraph, he wants you to write down 2 or 3 sentences as to what it means to you. Then you have to pay attention. Which I didn't like doing. I got to pages 13, 14, and 15 of Bill's story. And I had to read it again. Because the things that I was hearing, some of the things I was hearing in the rooms, and some of the things that were in this book didn't match up. And I'm saying something is wrong here. And you guys, please understand, I am not about right and wrong. I don't believe in right and wrong. I don't believe in debating. And I'm not here tonight to tell you what you have to do. Okay? I'm just telling you what the truth is. And I'm here tonight because I truly care. I authentically care. And I got into this book, and I'm reading how our co-founder went through the steps. And there was no Alcoholics Anonymous. December 11th, 1934 was Bill's sobriety date. And he was in this hospital, Towns Hospital. And he's got a guy coming into not rehab, detox, doing the steps with him. Not only that, But it tells us he was suffering from delirium tremens when he was doing his 4-step. So it doesn't say I did my 4-step. It says we made I made a list. It says we made a list. Who do you think did the writing? I'm sure it was Ebby Thatcher, because he was shaking so much. And you know what? These guys were clever. Really clever. You know why, you guys? And you know why they went and they helped people when they were in such pain? Because you're desperate. That's why. I know how desperate I was when I was at that meeting that day, and how many times did 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days go by when the booze is out of me, and you know it's not so bad after all. And I'm not willing to accept the help. But these guys, that's why that old famous picture of the fellow in bed, and then there's 2 guys sitting down, that's classic. I love going to detoxes. But detox seems more today of just take it easy for now. We're going to get you cleaned up. You know, sitting here for 3 or 4 days. Help them out, man. You know, time does not change us. God does. It's not like this is not like a Band-Aid where the more time goes by, the better we're going to get. Sorry about that. It's not happening. God does for us what we can't do for ourselves. God does not do for us what we can do for ourselves. And I was thinking God was going to do many things for me that I'm very capable of doing by myself. No, it doesn't work that way. He's not here to compromise with us like that. It's very clear to me. So anyway, I show up at 5 o'clock to this place in New London, Connecticut, and this man, Pete, he had a huge reputation for getting to meetings early. And what I was told, that we go to meetings to stay sober. I'm here to save my butt. I'm this and that. I go to meetings strictly to stay sober. Well, I showed up at the meeting at 5 like he had said, and there he was. He was there early, and he was picking stuff off the ground and putting in the garbage. And so I'm thinking, well, that's kind of smart then. He's going to, these meetings really early because he's in a safe place and he's not going to drink. And so I said to him that day, I was like kind of trying to be positive because I didn't know how to communicate with anybody yet. I didn't know how to, I had started drinking in the 3rd grade. In the 3rd grade summer is when I really went at it. And I got involved in other things as well. I know it's unimaginable. I'm not really proud of that, but that's where it started. So I didn't know how to live, you guys. I did not. I didn't know how to talk to a male. I didn't know how to talk to a female. I didn't know. I was always scared. So I say to this man, I said, you come to these meetings early so you're in a safe place and you don't drink. And he snickered. He said, David, I come to these meetings early so I can be here if a newcomer shows up. Going to meetings to help other people. I was completely, that was the day that was the second day I stopped questioning the man altogether. I said, this is the guy. I picked the right guy. And he was, talk about the word authentic again. He was so authentic about it. And he says that he does have many reasons for going to meetings. He can learn, loves learning, loves listening, loves helping. He said, but the main reason that he goes to meetings is he shows up to help the new person. Wow. I'd never heard that before. Never. Not even once. I thought it was all about me. So we sit down, and he opens to the doctor's opinion, and he told me, he pointed out a couple words, and I have never heard anybody explain alcoholism quite like Dr. Silkworth. And in the doctor's opinion, there's some key words, and one of those words is allergy. Dr. Silkworth says we have an allergy to alcohol. And I didn't understand that. I thought I knew what an allergy is. I said, I don't have an allergy. And my sponsor had me look that word up in the dictionary. And I went home and I looked it up. And the third definition down said abnormal reaction. And I was blown. I said, oh my Lord, I have an abnormal reaction to alcohol. A normal reaction is, I've had a couple drinks, I can't drive. I've had a glass of wine, you know what, I have to work tomorrow, it's time to go home, kind of getting tired. Normal reaction. Not with me. When I drink, an abnormal reaction starts. That's when the allergy starts. Okay? And I can't stop. I don't know when. I don't. If anybody said, when would you stop? Like my mom said to me about 5 or 6 years ago. She always asks me questions. She doesn't know, and God bless her. And I usually have an answer for her. And she said to me, and she said, David, what would happen if you drank now? And my mouth opened. I don't know. I don't know what. I would like to say I would go to a meeting the next day. I don't know that. You guys know that. I don't know. It would be awful. So anyway, I'm like blown away with this allergy thing. And then, and the second word is craving. It's really important we understand these words too. And he uses the word craving, is the feeling that we get after we pick up a drink. The feeling we get after we drink. What do we want? More. That's what a craving is. So, as Dr. Silkworth says in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, in the doctor's opinion, prior to picking up a drink, there's no allergy and there's no craving. Simply because the allergy and the craving are only related to the physical side of the disease. So right now, I can't start my allergy. If there's a drink in front of me, it doesn't start my allergy. Nor is it possible for me to crave right now. I can obsess, I can desire, I can want, but I cannot crave. And I know that awful feeling all too well. Once I put that first one in my system, I immediately start the allergy and the craving begin. And it's awful. It's stronger than any force I've ever had in my life, with the exception of God. It's disgusting. So, when these guys wrote this too, speaking of clever, notice the first step says, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol. It does not say we admitted that we are powerless over alcohol. You know why? Because right now, you guys, I'm not powerless over alcohol. You know why? Because there's no booze in my system. If I've got a bottle of booze here, it's got no power over me until I drink. And then I become powerless over alcohol. So the first step is really not about being down and out. It says alcohol and powerless and unmanageability. At the same time, it's very enthusiastic, where it says we admitted that we were powerless. Somebody's made a change here in their lives, you know what I'm saying? Somebody's done something. And so I take it cool. So anyway, we get into a lot more stuff and so forth and so on, and I'm just going to say one thing too. It's not, to see if you're an alcoholic, and I wish I had time to tell the story. It's not how often we drink. It's not what time of day we drink. It's not what we drink. It's what happens when we drink. I have many, many, many friends, male and female, who drink just about every 6 or 7 days a week. And they come home at 5:30, and they'll have a small glass of wine with dinner, or they'll drink half of it in front of the TV, and then bring the next half to the dinner table. Okay? No exaggeration. And that's it. They stop. So there's something, you can't say an alcoholic is somebody who drinks every day. Generally speaking, we do drink every day. But that's not a good definition. Because there's people who like to drink every day to relax. And they don't want any more than one glass of wine. That's enough to relax them and soothe them. Never felt that before, but... So, I'm like, wow. So he brings me to page 30 in this book, and there's a statement there, and it said, we have to fully concede to our innermost selves we are alcoholics. So he opens the book because he wanted me to see it, and he highlighted it for me, and he put first step, and he flipped it around, and he turned it into a question, and he said, David, do you fully concede to your innermost self you're an alcoholic? I said, yes. And he shook my hand. He said, "Congratulations." He said, "You've completed step 1." And I was like, that felt, I've read the steps. I've talked about the steps. I went to step meetings, and I thought that was taking the steps. Now I'm taking the steps. It took us exactly 35 minutes. I knew that exactly, because we started at 5:10, and at 5:45, we were up and walking into the meeting. 35 minutes. So then he said, "Meet me here tomorrow." I said, "Okay." He goes, "We're going to take step 2. I saw him. There he is again, picking up stuff. And I said, "You're here early because you want to help the newcomer, right?" And he said, "That's right." I said, "Right on, man." So we sit down. And this was about 20 to 22 minutes, and came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I always thought the insanity was, the only thing that made sense to me was the places I used to end up, what I put into my body, how many times I'd get arrested, how fast I would get arrested. I was good at that, or should I say bad, I don't know. And, so forth and so on. And then he explained it to me. Once again, speaking of the word clever, here we go again. It's got nothing to do with drinking. Nothing. And I was like, "What do you mean?" He said, "David," he said, "it's an issue when we're dishonest with somebody. However, there's something else that's far more crazy than that." And I said, "What?" He said, "Being dishonest with yourself and believing your own lies." And he goes, "I'll be more specific with you." He said, "This step is all about the thought that precedes the first drink. When we haven't picked up a drink or a drug for that matter, and we tell ourselves stories. You know what? I'm going to drink wine. I'm going to drink with Heather. I never got in trouble with her. I'm just going to drink beer. I'm only going to bring $20 with me." And you guys, this is when we're sober. We can't blame alcohol on it. We haven't picked up yet. And our minds tell us things that aren't true. And then we go ahead and we pick up the drink. And once again, I'm not here for debate. This is just something I disagree with entirely. They say that insanity is, help me out here, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. It's repeating the same actions, expecting different results, right? It's repeating the same thinking, expecting different results. Not actions. We're not talking about actions. This is mental, not physical. So, and our literature tells us that the main problem, quote unquote, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind rather than the body. Very important information. Boy, I thought about that for a long time too. So I need to change my thinking rather than and I always used to try to stop drinking, but you need to change your thinking before you can stop the action. And to change your thinking, you have to get well spiritually. And I don't mean to jump the gun, but in the third step or the fourth step, it tells us when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally, then physically. And here I am just focusing on stopping drinking, the action. No wonder why I couldn't stop. I wasn't starting with the right thing. So anyway, I was blown away with this. And he brings me to this question, the second step question. And I'm so grateful that they actually worded it the way they did. Because I didn't feel scared and put in a corner and you must believe. It says, do you now believe? Or are you even willing to believe that there's a power greater than yourself? I was like, God, thank God for that willing. But I said, I'm willing, sure. He got up, he shook my hand, he said, congratulations. He said, you've completed step 2. And that's when I felt change. Something was different. I remember looking at the ground and I was like, oof. So 3 days later, I was 5 days sober and we went to Ender's Island. It's a spiritual retreat over here in Mystic, northbound in Mystic. And this was the most difficult step for me to take, clearly. When I think about it, it was harder than my 4th, harder than my 5th, harder than my 9th. It was very difficult for me. And we went to Ender's Island. He said, I'm going to introduce you to God today. and here I am, such a disaster, and I'm so scared of change. God forbid if I were to change. You know, I had been living in such a way for 25 and a half years. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know who I am at all. I've always put this mask on and just been terrified my whole life. And step 3, what do we mean? We made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understand Him. Just what do we mean by that? Well, let's break it down. Made a decision to turn our will. Our will is our thinking. Okay? And our lives are our actions. So essentially in step 3, what we're going to make a decision to turn my thinking and my actions over to the care of this higher power. Because in step 2, we said the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind rather than the body. So wouldn't it stand to reason that if this higher power is ruling my thinking, that my actions are good? If my thinking is good, my actions are good. Always works. If my thinking is poor, my actions are usually poor. So, we got on our knees, and I thought that what came into my mind was I was going to be a religious something or another, and I visualized myself wearing a robe and going down the road and trying to talk to people to get them to go to my center for the religious movement. That's specifically and precisely what was going on in my mind. That's how scared I was of God. And so I got on my knees and we opened to page 63 and there's this prayer and it says, God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Amen. We have then completed step 3. And then he showed, and when I got up, at once, and I use those terms, I use that term for a reason, at once he gave me the directions for the 4th step and told me to go home and start it at once. And he told me to read, and I did, and I got home. I never saw this stuff before. God forbid if you want to get sober and you want to open a book called Alcoholics Anonymous. That's like the last thing we want. I want the easier, softer way. I want to see if I can get away with a little more drinking and get a couple more arrests under my belt. And so I went home and I read, and it tells us, it says, though our decision, which was the third step, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little or any type of permanent effect unless at once followed by the 4th step. So they're telling you to start the 4th step at once after the 3rd step. That's a time frame, you guys. You can say, yeah, well, it's just a suggestion. That's fine. You can say it's a suggestion. I tried my way long enough. All right? It doesn't say this is just a suggestion after that. It says at once. And the reason being, they are thinking that your relationship with your higher power now is as best as it's ever been after taking step 3. And they don't want that to dissipate. They want that strength within and have it go into your 4th step. So I went home and I started the 4th step at once. And thoroughness and honesty, the 2 watchwords, which I don't like at all. And the resentment list, if you would have known me, well, you would have known me the last 9 months because I wasn't social in any way, shape, or form. I was in places that were not very pleasant. But if you had known me, you would never thought I was an angry person. But when I got honest and I wrote down all the things that I was, like my resentment list, and my sponsor said, I don't want to hear about the guy who flipped you off today in the car. That's not resentment. I want you to go back when you were a small child and things that you're really pissed off at. And don't leave anything out. He goes, because, and I read on the 5th step too, and it says, if we leave something out, almost invariably we get drunk. So, and it says thoroughness and honesty are the watchwords in step 4. So I went ahead and I wrote down everything. I got to my fear list, and that was hard. It was really hard. And I wrote everything down. There was 3 things I wasn't going to tell anybody. And I put these 3 things in code, just in case anybody found I died that night or something happened. I just put like the first 3 words of what it was and what have you. And I said, I hope I can tell him. And I didn't know, and I still don't know, if I would have told him if he hadn't done what he'd done. So my 4th step took me like 5 days or so. And I was thorough. I was thorough and I was honest, and everything was on there. If I missed anything, it was not that imperative, because I would have thought about it by now. And if I hadn't, oh well, God didn't want me to. But there was nothing. I was like, God, I need to tell him that. And the first thing he did, he looks at me, and I know what was going through his mind too. He's thinking, I don't think this kid's going to tell me everything. So he goes deep into his safe and he pulls out his 4th and 5th step from 12 years ago. And he starts going down his columns and starts telling me what his fears were and what he had done. And it was deep stuff. I was like, oh my God, you did that? And he's like, yeah, I did. So what he did, he lightened things up for me, made me feel a lot easier. Great advice if you ever have somebody like that. And on that day, I told him everything that I had done. I told him the fear list and what have you. And the beauty of the 5th step is you need to have somebody. It says we need to have somebody there that knows what we're driving at. It takes another person to see us as we really are. Because I was so used to being me, I didn't know about selfishness. I thought that this world was about me. I thought it was all about, every man for himself. And that's it, What's yours is mine, what's mine is mine, or whatever they say. So anyway, it took us a couple hours, and he brought me down in his cellar. I forgot about this. And he put this little carpet down, and he had a pitcher of ice water, and he had the soft music playing, and I'm like, dude, I am so scared right now. What's up with this little arrangement down here? This is not what it's like a little vacation down in your cellar. And I'm like, whoa. And I got up after I was done, and he gave me a big hug, and he held on to me. He said, you did a really good job. And I believed him, and he was being absolutely truthful. And that's when I felt extreme change. I'm not going to tell you it felt absolutely fantastic. I'm not going to tell you it felt horrible by any means. And I just felt different to such extremes, it was unimaginable. And I had been living in this big chunk of, self had been just walloped out of me. And I remember I had a sports car at the time, and I was driving over the Groton Bridge, and I looked at my speedometer, and I was going 43 miles an hour. And I used to drive pretty quick, not obnoxiously. And I got home, and he told me to go home and do steps 6 and 7. So I went home, and it says we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. Not O-U-R, H-O-U-R. Okay? 60 minutes, hour, time frame number 2. Okay? And you're going to get people that are going to debate this, but I'm just reading what's in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And I need to tell you something else why that I say that I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I forgot to do that, so let me go ahead and do that now. I do not say that I'm an alcoholic simply because of the fact I believe in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. In the foreword to the first edition of the book, it tells us exactly how to identify ourselves. Okay? And it says, when speaking publicly, which is an open meeting, all right? we omit our personal name and we introduce ourselves as members of Alcoholics Anonymous. The reason being is because we are introducing ourselves as part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And this is exactly what was done in 1939. And I actually talked to two people, an old National Archivist and the National Archivist, and they both said the exact same thing at the General Service Office. It's not documented because there is no documentation. It was definitely done until somewhere in the mid-50s, and they're almost sure it was done in California. So 1939 to 1954, 1955, it was said, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then somebody got cute and all of a sudden started saying, I'm an alcoholic. So that's why I do that. I don't do it to be different. I don't care. And it really feels cool. It really feels like you have accomplished, you're living in the solution rather than part of the problem. And that's what the book says. So if I'm going to be doing what's in the book, why am I going to leave this part out? You can read it yourself for the first edition. So anyway, step 6, I went home for an hour and I carefully reviewed what I've done. And what they really want you to do is just make sure that you haven't left anything out. Have you skimped on the mortar, whatever they say? And I went over everything, you guys, and there was, if there's something that you've kept to yourself and it's a big thing, or, whatever it may be, they want you to either, go back to your sponsor's house or they want you to get on the phone and just cough it up, get rid of it. Because if you don't, it's, what this process is, it's not going to work. You haven't humbled yourself enough. And speaking of humble, I'm going to end with a great story too. I sat there exactly for 1 hour because I was so destined, On chapter 5, it says, rarely have we seen a person fail that has thoroughly followed our path. Wow, those are strong statistics, man. I've never followed this path before. The path that's in this book. So I made sure it was an hour. I was going right by this book and I was da-da-da. And, after an hour, if we don't find out what the truth is about ourselves in steps 4 and 5, we can't ask God to take it away in 6 and 7. So I found out I was dishonest. I found out I was very fearful. I found out that I was angry, which I was very surprised at. I had a lot of pride, overabundance, feeling one up and feeling one down, both ways that pride, And I found out my ego and envy and jealousy and all this other stuff. So what do we do with all this stuff? And then there's a question on step 6, and the little, I don't want to say the little that the emphasis that they put on it, but what a massive question. Are you now entirely ready to let God remove the things that are objectionable? Can He take them all, each and every one? And I'm like, it felt like, take all this stuff. This is what I'm composed of. This is what makes me. I put my head down and I said a little prayer. I said, God, please help me with this. And I said, yes, you can have it all. And then it says, when ready, we can say the 7-step prayer. And much like the 3rd step prayer, it says, my Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And you know what, you guys? What I was confused with, because I was so caught up in myself, the 3rd step prayer, 7-step prayer, it's not about, God, please help me not drink today. Okay? There's nothing wrong with saying that. But that's not my point. My point being that this book called Alcoholics Anonymous does not say your job now is not to drink. It does say your job now is to serve God and the people about you. And that's what these steps do to you. They bring you beyond yourself. When I wasn't working the steps and I was just not drinking and going to meetings, My life was all about me not drinking. In other words, it was all about me and alcohol. I couldn't get beyond myself. I thought I was put here to not drink. And I've come up with a hypothetical situation, and when I die one day, and I go before God, and He says, "What did you do with your life?" And I say, "Oh, I didn't drink." It is funny. Who cares? Boy, you didn't drink? That's what you did with your life? That's what you didn't do. That wasn't my question. What did you do with your life? I want to say, you know what? I did my best to serve you. I know I made error, but I sure made a hell of a try. So, step 6 and 7 were absolutely huge for me. Huge. And step 6 was so hard. God doesn't want part of us. God wants all of us. I don't consider myself a member of Alcoholics Anonymous because I don't drink and go to meetings. I consider myself a member of Alcoholics Anonymous by the way I live. And to end with this, it's got a lot to do with 6 and 7 too, especially for somebody like me. There's this fellow, this is about humility, and my friend James Howe always asked me, "Could you be the town fool? Could you do this?" I said, "Do what, James?" He said, "Well, there's this guy, and he's referred to as the town fool. He lives in a very little small house. He has no electricity, and he comes in from the woods, and he goes into town once a week for all his food supplies. Always got a smile on his face. He's made a mockery of what the townsmen do. What one of the guys does is something really cruel. And what he does, he gets a dime and a nickel, and he puts it in his hand. And of course, he does the grandstand effect with many people in back of him, so he gets the real torch. And he says, 'Hey, town fool.' He goes, 'Go ahead and take one.' And seeing that the nickel is bigger, it's probably worth more, he goes ahead and takes the nickel and everybody laughs at him. This happens for years and years. Every time the town fool takes the nickel, smiles and says thank you and walks away. So finally, after many years, one of the guys walks up to him and says, 'Dude, you've been doing this for so long. Take the dime, it's worth more.' He says, 'If I take the dime, they won't offer me the nickel anymore.'" Thank you guys very much. Appreciate it.